Welcome to the People, Property, Place podcast with me, your host, Matthew Watts, founder and managing director of Rockbourne. This is a podcast where I share the stories, views, opinions and career journeys of the movers, shakers, innovators and leaders in the real estate industry. Welcome to the People, Property, Place podcast. Today I'm joined by Dan Rees, co-founder of Candour. Dan started his career at Orion before moving to Brockton Capital, having been educated at Cass and then Cambridge. So yeah, Dan, welcome.
Well, thanks for having us.
Not at all. I guess where I wanted to start today is just how you got into property right at the start.
Yeah, that's one of those sort of typical interview questions, I guess. And I wish I had like a brilliant answer with like a deep history of property people behind me, but that's just not the case. I'm not entirely sure. I had this vague recollection of looking through the prospective magazines of a couple of universities and seeing one with property on it. So it looked good at the time. And I'd probably watched something to show on TV where someone had made a ton of money on a property deal and thought it was a good idea. So yeah, that was a slightly stumbled into it, if I'm perfectly honest.
And so having kind of done it at Cass, you wanted a little bit more and went to Cambridge, or was it just a case of timing, global financial crash? Yeah, it was quite difficult to maybe get a job at that time.
Yeah, a bit of that. I think the year at Cambridge was beneficial from a networking point of view, and yeah, it was useful in the learning. I think a lot of people do that who have done similar sort of courses. What you learn there and what you do in the real world don't really talk to each other all that well. It did allow the economy to sort of improve, and I was sort of a year on, and I was sort of looking at all sorts of careers at that point as well. It just felt like the right thing at the time. Yeah.
And from there, we place and we talk to a lot of people who are educated at like similar institutions. Finding that first job out of uni can sometimes be challenging. I know that a lot of the kind of the tier one US private equity players really try and tap up graduates from those courses. But it can be challenging if you don't go to a Blackstone or a Brookfield or an Apollo or an Ares straight off the bat. How did you find that first job at Orion and how did that come around?
So at the time, I had a couple of sort of corporate finance sort of job offers out there. And then quite randomly, Orion were in touch. They were looking for an analyst at the time. And this whole sort of big wide world of private equity and just investment management, to be fair, I was very naive. I didn't really know what it was all about. So the year before that, I sort of decided that property investment or private equity was where I would like to end up. Anyway, so I got this job offer from Orion and I had one from one of the sort of big four accountancy firms for a corporate finance role. And it's funny, I played football and there's this young guy there who was a trader at Deutsche. And so sort of, me being sort of young and impressionable was like, oh, this guy's a kind of a big deal. And I sort of tapped him as we were walking off the pitch one day. And I said to him, Addy, I've got these 2 job offers, And I said, one looks like quite job security because I could become a training and get some letters after your name. The other one is sort of like this sort of private equity thing. I don't think you'd get any sort of accreditations from it or anything, but I think it's kind of where I'd like to go. He said, and I'm about to bleep this one out. He said, fuck job security. Dan, you're 21, 22 at the time. He goes, you've got loads of time to get jobs and it will go wrong and all go right. So if that's what you want to do, eventually just go take it now.
Wow.
And so off the whim of that, and to be fair, I was already sort of leaning down that road. But I remember very clearly, I can remember the picture it was on and walking off. And I thought, I'll call back on Monday and I'll take that job.
Even though Orion relatively unknown at that time, or?
In my little world, they were. But, as I quickly realized, no, not at all. They were, I didn't realize quite how significant and how lucky I had been that they'd randomly got in touch, really.
And you were there as an analyst for a couple of years, working on investments across the UK, Europe?
UK, with a focus on sort of City of London offices and London residential. I worked with Britta Harper, since left. But one of the great things about Orion is, most of the office we sat in London, and I had, exposure to Arif and Bruce and Van, who are the partners there, who were just, absolutely brilliant. And that was a great sort of learning experience. And I was from sort of small town boy sort of and this was the big wide world, and I was loving it and seeing people like Arif in action, negotiating, and I was learning from the very best from the very start. I didn't know that at the time. Do you know what I mean? It's only when I look back afterwards, I was like, wow, I was in the meeting with some of the best UK real estate investors.
Were you kind of one of a couple of analysts, or were you kind of like a cohort or a pool of 10? And like,
Just me.
Just you. So
Just
you
me.
literally were like number 2, number 3, brought in on...
No, so
in terms of these deals, like you got significant exposure.
Yes, good exposure. Orion had hired 2 people from Lehman a couple of years previously. So there's a good structure in place. They were associates and directors. So I worked, within that team.
So you got some amazing exposure for being a relatively fresh, green behind the ear kind of analyst.
Yeah.
Right in the deep end.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. And then Brockton, do they come knocking or what?
So
what was the...
I'd been at Orion 2 years, and life was good, and we were doing, we had some really good City of London office developments starting to sort of come out of the ground. But the team was quite small at Orion, and I think I probably needed to learn from osmosis, maybe sort of on the ground a bit more, and be part of more of a cohort, as you put it earlier. And so joining up Brockton again, I just sort of go with my gut, and at the time it felt like the right move. On paper, you could say, that doesn't, European to UK only, etc., etc. But when your sort of gut says it's the right move, and there's almost no point asking for advice because, sometimes advice is pointless.
So you just took it.
Yeah.
And then you moved as what, an associate, or did you went in as an analyst again?
And Brockton at the time had hired, there was 3 of us in that sort of class, and it was 2013 at that point, the start of a lot of fun.
And how, at that time, how was the money structure with the different funds? Was it all value add? Did you have a range of different asset classes you were looking at? Was it literally just predicated on returns?
So at that point, Brockton was about halfway through their second fund's investment period. And so it was a case of deploying the second fund, and then that rolled very quickly into deploying the third fund and an opportunistic sort of cost of capital.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
And so you kind of progressed from an analyst through the ranks, taking more of a lead on...
Yes, and I work very closely with Tony Edgley there. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, I've had a chance at Orion, to work at Arif was brilliant. And then straight into Brockton, I was working with Tony and people like David Marks. And these guys are sort of geniuses, and, you're getting sort of face-to-face exposure, in the room exposure. They're not sort of, floating in some glass office in New York that you see on a video camera once a month. These are like real people in the real office doing real stuff. And so by luck or judgment, I had 2 jobs in a row where, I could see, really great people doing their thing.
So how did candour come about?
So what I failed to mention when we were talking about Orion is during my time at Orion, we had 2 joint ventures in the City of London with Quadrant Estates, and the eventual lead developer there, who was relatively young like me at the time, was Toby, now my co-founder of Candour. And so we met 2011, 2012. He went on to sort of climb the ranks at Quadrant, and I went off to Brockton. And then, we always stayed in touch, and we always sort of discussed business ideas and what the future may look like. And then the stars aligned as the years went on. In sort of 2019, we started Candour, and we've sort of gone full circle. So having met, 6-7 years ago, or 6-7 years prior, we started Candour, and Toby is an out and out sort of developer, world-class developer in my mind. And you'd say, of course, Dan, you'd say that, but I've seen different developers at work, and he has a complete grasp of A to Z of what's required to take a piece of dirt into a finished, leased up building. And that's actually quite rare, I think. A lot of developers are very good at doing that stage of the business plan.
Yeah. But also probably someone at that age as well, right? For you to have that confidence in someone.
Like me, he had having worked these sort of, although Orion and Brockton are big businesses on one level, that's quite small and intimate on another level. And Toby had that same kind of experience with Quadrant. He'd been at the very sort of coalface of development and proper development of scale as well. This isn't sort of, refurbing a floor, 4,000 square foot suite. This is,
massive
big development in the city, and some residential stuff as well. So you don't get a chance to start a business with a great guy very often.
Yeah.
And when you do, you got to think long and hard about it. And so, it felt right. We started Candour in, early 19.
So from your skill set, the analytical, transactional piece combined with his development delivery experience was kind of the 2 pieces that you could combine together.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to look at it. We sort of complement each other very well, and we know enough about what each other's doing to sort of keep each other on their toes, So it works sort of perfectly like that. Yeah.
How does it work in terms of like lining up a deal? Is it like working your bedroom together, like hustling your contacts or your agents, or how do you go about like forming the business and then trying to originate kit, or how did that work? Because that must have been relatively challenging.
Yes. We started the business early 19 and we acquired our first site in Q3 19. And that is the sort of the big risk, isn't it? You start on these businesses, you put a bit of money in a shared account, pay the office fees and your mobile phone subscription, and you go out there and you just sort of hope to find a deal and a good one as well. And so that's really how we started. We knew what product we wanted to develop, we knew what sites we wanted to target. So we went out with a relatively focused idea of what we wanted. And we were fortunate enough, like I said, in Q3 19 to form a joint venture with Tristan Capital Partners and acquire a site in Bristol, which we're bringing forward at the moment.
Amazing. So how did that come about? Just kissing lots of frogs, chasing lots of deals, doing a lot of...
Yeah, not too many frogs on that one. So that was an opportunity to buy consented land at a good cost basis, and it fitted really well with the strategy that Tristan had. And so actually, once we found the site, did the initial underwrite, did the initial analysis that we do before approaching capital, we had a strong feeling and inclination that this would be right for Tristan.
Yeah. And then that was in 2019?
Yeah, late 19.
And so you've worked it through kind of planning and you're through kind of delivery focus at the moment, and it's going to be delivered next year?
So we're on site at the moment. We signed a build contract with Waits. We're on site. PC will be end of 23. Amazing. So we're, and the Bristol market remains a really strong market in terms of take up. The supply is sensible.
Yeah.
And, we're building the right product for that market, both for the occupational market and the eventual, investment market as well.
And so once you've kind of got that first deal, I guess your role, you probably take a little bit of a step back. That's over to Toby to deliver it and manage it, right? Your role is kind of, where's the next project coming from?
Yes, an element of that. And at the same time, when you're dealing with those sums of money, institutional investors, institutional debt provider as well, there's a lot of reporting, a lot of, monitoring, financial monitoring, accountancy monitoring. And so not entirely, hands off. There's still a lot of work asset managing that. And we're completely transparent with the investors, or with Tristan. And to be totally transparent, numbers are involved. This is pounds and pence in and out. So yeah, not entirely hands off.
And then COVID obviously hit not long after that.
Yeah, good timing and bad timing. Depends how you look at it, really. Great that it's over and we'll be, PCing a building not into COVID. So that would have been challenging, I'm sure. And you sort of look back, and I've only had a short career, and you think, oh man, every 2-3 years, there seems to be something, it'd be Brexit or COVID or the war. Recessions. I mean, I started after the first one, but I think, the fact is, life's tricky and these things happen. There isn't a smooth, I don't think there's ever a smooth period of time. So, we don't get too bitter about it. It's just the natural obstacles of, doing business, I guess.
The reality of it.
Yeah, exactly. The reality of it.
Yeah. So you've got a portfolio now of 3, or is it 4 assets?
So as it stands today, as we sit here, we have 3, I call them projects, or 3 ventures, whatever you want to call them. Bristol being our debut, that sort of got us going. We are working with Schroders on the City of London repositioning, which is heavy asset management, and then a heavy development role. And then we're also working with Hines on a longer term industrial play just outside of London.
Wow. So it's going to be kind of business space driven.
Exactly. Yeah. Workspace. I think the key for us, and one of the things we set out to do and we've managed to stay focused on, is going for, delivering assets of scale in highly connected areas in dominant centres. So, London, Big Six, etc. Yeah. And that takes discipline, that takes saying no to stuff, which, can sound sort of arrogant, when you say, you're sort of saying no to deals that are perfectly sensible, and why wouldn't you? But I think, to build a business of scale and a business that's known for doing, certain types of investment and developments, then you have to stay disciplined. Yeah,
and stay in the niche, right? And really build that expertise and that understanding, and be known for one of the go-to players within that space. Yeah, very strong presence there. Where does ESG fit into all of this? It's been a buzzword for a few years. I know from conversations with other people, investors drive it, but more recently occupiers are driving it. Where does kind of ESG fit into kind of real estate development at the moment?
So and you'd expect me to say this, it's a big deal for us. And the way I put it, well, to be fair, if you're developing anything now, you just can't take a shortcut on ESG. And we should focus on the E, because, at least when we're building stuff, you can't afford to take a shortcut. I should say it's a risky move. Yes, you could build it cheaper and you might even lease it, but then you'll get dinged on the back end when you sell it, or you may never be able to lease it. So it's a risky move if you neglect it. In Bristol, we've taken 0 shortcuts. We've pushed the boat out on that. We'll be delivering a net zero all electric building. Ever since the start of the business, what we've always thought and believed in is that we're in our early 30s, right? So we've got years ahead of us. We've got long enough to be rewarded for going long on ESG. We don't need to make a quick buck tomorrow. This isn't our last hurrah. Our reputation needs to endure for a long time. So we can't afford to take a shortcut on ESG. We're completely aware of a lot of the greenwashing and the smoke and mirrors that lots of industries currently sort of seem to get away with when it comes to ESG. And, the moment you start to actually read into what are companies actually doing, what are developers actually delivering, you very quickly realize that it's not always quite as rosy as people say it is.
Yeah, I love your point just about that long-term view as well. I think sometimes people get caught up in the short term, and actually having a long-term view and perspective, is absolutely the right way. And I'm excited to see that scheme come forward and what you achieve. And I guess on the logistics side as well, there's a big play for ESG within that space. And it's not just sticking solar panels on the roof. What does that scheme look like in Heathrow, and what are the plans there?
I agree with you. I mean, all real estate sectors have to take, their environmental credentials seriously. It's going to be, I don't really see a sector who can ignore it.
Yeah.
On the industrial side, it's very early on in that business plan and what we end up building and shape the size of that. But, with Hines, they have the same sort of top-down ESG drive that you'd expect. And what we've been lucky, with so far with the business is we've got 3 investors on 3 separate things, but all 3 completely get and understand and are happy to drive with us the required ESG and environmental principles that we want as a business to be known for. So we're not having to compromise what we want to do because of our investors.
Yeah, fully aligned on that side.
Exactly.
So in terms of moving forward, what are the kind of the plans? What are your aspirations, and what do you want to be doing and taking candour forward in?
So we'll remain, looking for opportunities of scale. We're looking at stuff across the big 6 in London. The market is in a tricky place at the moment. I say tricky, I should probably use the word interesting. But actually, ever since both Toby and I really started our careers, generally been on an upward trajectory, and actually a bit of volatility, a bit of repricing. That's absolutely no bad thing for our generation. I think a lot of us in my sort of our era, I should say, would do well for a bit of a rumble, because it's been quite a long time of almost a bit too good to be true. So not that I'm hoping for a disaster, but it's a bit of a cliche, but opportunity comes from these things. So bit of repricing, bit of distress, that would be no bad thing.
And you've got capital partners who can take advantage of that with you.
Exactly. We have capital partners who are well capitalized, either at the start of a fund, and they've got 3 years to invest their capital, so a lot really fresh.
Yeah.
And others who are halfway through their investment period and still keen to do more. So there doesn't seem to be a lack of capital outlet in the markets. You just look at sort of the recent fundraising of some of the big guys and sort of low leverage levels of others, and you very quickly realize there's still a lot of capital in the system. So I guess that goes against my point earlier. How much of a repricing will we see while all this capital is still sort of waiting on the sidelines?
It sounds like you're well placed to take advantage of it.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I do think we're well placed, and it's keeping an ear to the ground, looking at opportunities, turning stones over, and looking to buy well priced, good opportunity kit.
Yeah. I noticed you recently brought on Andrew Heinard as a non-exec director.
We've brought on Andrew as chairman, actually.
As chairman.
Yeah. So Andrew's always been an advisor to us, a close friend, and so on. We've been able to sort of get his views on all sorts of matters across the business, both property specific and more sort of general business bits and bobs. We formalised that role with Andrew earlier this year, and it's been already very beneficial to us. Andrew sits in our office 2 days a week. So we get a lot of FaceTime with him. He's a very well connected guy. And, Toby and I, as I said earlier, we're still quite young, still green in some areas. And to have someone of Andrew's experience sort of sit with us and next to us, and it helps just to calm us down, think maybe slightly a bit more longer term, more maturely about some things. So it's been a really good move. I mean, I would say we made a smart move. Bringing him on.
Do you regret not bringing him on sooner?
Oh, we would if we could.
Fine.
Yeah. So these things take. We've been lucky because, like I said, he's always only been a phone call away. But we wanted to formalise it. I think he's getting a lot out of it, and we're getting lots out of it.
Yeah. So you've also brought on a development director recently as well. I guess just with your assets or your projects under management, you need a few more hands internally. Is the plan to build headcount, or is it to kind of remain quite lean internally but lean on external parties for their expertise?
Well, we'll build. I wouldn't put it that we'll build headcount, and we won't hire for the sake of hiring. We're a small business still. We're a small lean team. I don't know why you would change that. There's certainly no egos in our business that wants to sort of have streams of people under us to make us look good. I'm not interested in that. So we'll hire appropriately, smartly at the right times, and like I said, bring on the right people for the right projects. And inevitably, as the business grows, that will mean a greater headcount. But for now, I'm the analyst, I'm the associate. We look at new deals together. So, Toby and I have got plenty of energy. We can actually cover a lot of bases. We're more than happy to do that.
Yeah, sounds great. Tell me about the Access project that you're involved with.
This is something we got involved with quite early on in the business. And it's so easy for a lot of businesses to tick the charity box by, giving money to charity. Like, that doesn't cost any, okay, it costs money, of course. But, time is, to most guys in this industry or a lot of industries, time is kind of most precious. And I think, a lot of charity stuff is just sort of like washing your conscience or washing your guilt, whatever it is, to make yourself feel good. But we felt like time is kind of actually quite challenging, quite hard.
Yeah.
And the Access project is a very simple scheme. You're matched up with a student who you tutor, and you'll tutor the subject you feel most comfortable in doing. And so that's something that we got involved with from the outset, and it's been good. It's been good. It's challenging. Like I said, there's times when you think, I haven't really got time for that. I could do something else. I think that's why it's probably the right thing to do.
Is that kind of mentorship from a real estate perspective, or is that kind of just like
Nothing.
life skill?
No,
it's just
nothing.
It's not even
Nothing.
linked to property.
No link to property at all. Yeah, it's completely nothing to property.
But it's great to kind of give back. And I think Rick Lewis calls it aspiration bubble, doesn't he? Change people's perspective on what's possible or what they can achieve by being paired up with someone who's rainmaking in some industry or can provide some value.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, their horizons aren't that great, and it doesn't take much to just sort of lift the lid on some much wider opportunities. And I think the Access project does that. It links up really good sort of young professionals with kids who want to do well. So you are working with the set that want to look under the hood if you lift it for them. You're not dragging their feet to come and do some more work. Yeah. So in that way, it's a good scheme. And like how you put it, you're showing these kids a much better or bigger world than they would otherwise see.
Amazing. So like our namesake here at the podcast, People Property Place, ask every guest, if you had £500 million, who are the people, what property, and which place would you be looking to invest? And I know that's within candour, but if you could assemble like an all-star team from the people you've worked with or you've heard of, maybe alive, maybe dead, who would you bring together on this kind of project?
Oh, good question. You put me on the spot there. Well, in terms of sector, that's a hard question right now. We were talking to some investors last week, and having conviction at the moment over a particular real estate sector in the UK is quite tricky. It's hard. So you see where industrial's gone in the last couple of months. Resi has its challenges, build costs going up, the hybrid working, how offices are used. We still believe that, best in class office space in the right locations has a future. But that does mean we've got a hell of a lot of office stock that is unneeded or not needed across the country. I can see the demand for the office space really focusing in on key locations. And so you want to make sure you're within that. In terms of people to do that, I think the team at Candour's, we're doing it right now, so further afield. But as I said, I've worked with some great people before and some quirky characters that see things in different ways, and they would tell you things about a building that you would think, how's that relevant? And then a week later you'd be like, yeah, of course that's relevant. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of weird. That is relevant. So I don't know. There's certain locations and certain things I would love to sort of sense check against David Marks or Arif or like a Tony. So yeah, I think those guys see stuff through a different, we all look at the same thing, but everyone's looking at it from a slightly different angle, and you want to make sure you can see what everyone else is seeing, and be challenged, because yeah, like I said, we all see it slightly differently, but at the same time, if you surround yourself by the same old people all day, every day, you'll start to think the same.
Groupthink kicks in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look, thank you so much for providing that insight and background. Really appreciate you on the podcast, and excited to see what you, Toby, and the team at Candour achieve over the coming years.
Thanks, Matt. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the People, Property, Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague, subscribe, give us a rating, like or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of which guests you think we should get on the podcast or areas of the market that we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People, Property, Place podcast is powered by Rockbourne. The team recruit experienced talent for real estate private equity firms, investment managers, REITs, property companies and advisory firms across the investment, asset management, development, fund management, ESG, cap markets, investor relations and general practice space. So if you're considering your career options at the moment or looking to attract top talent to come and work for you, head over to the website www.rockbourne.com, where you can find a wealth of resource to aid your search. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you next time.